remains of the Nazis' gravest crimes today. The extermination camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland on this 80th anniversary of its liberation. Of the more than 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis, 1.1 million were killed at Auschwitz, and among them, nearly 250,000 were children. Many of the survivors there today were just children when they were marched through the camp on little feet wearing little shoes. Now, a project to preserve those shoes is renewing attention on the war's smallest victims. Here's special correspondent Malcolm Bradford.
Behind guard towers and disconnected electrified barbed wire fences, dedicated restorers are working with great tenderness in a place synonymous with unspeakable cruelty.
Time is our main enemy here.
Historian Martin Noras has been working for 2 years, preserving shoes belonging to the extermination camp's youngest victims.
The leather itself is pretty resilient when it comes to the passage of time. Metal, however, is our main issue. Metal starts corroding. That corrosion triggers degradation processes and everything else.
Although Auschwitz was turned into a museum a year after being liberated by the Soviet Red Army in January 1945, it remains a crime scene.
Basically, we are dealing with evidence of a crime. This is the philosophy adopted by the museum, that this is evidence of a crime, one of the largest crimes in the world's history.
The conservators are working on 8,000 children's shoes, a fraction of the 120,000 in the Auschwitz collection.
Preserving these objects, this evidence, is about preserving the memory of the victims of the crime, preserving their identity often.
In all, 1.5 million children were murdered during the Holocaust. 235,000 perished here at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Frequently, children were the first to be exterminated because the Nazis believed that they were too weak to be forced to work and were a waste of food. 80 years ago, the air here was heavy with the stench of death, but not anymore. Over time, the ashes of the children have been absorbed into the earth, and they are beneath my feet. And beneath the feet of millions who walk past this drawing of an orchestra serenading slave labourers beneath the sign, "Work sets you free." The victims of Auschwitz had no graves. The only tangible evidence of their earthly presence are the possessions the Germans confiscated as they ordered the Jews to take a shower. We're not allowed to film the exhibit of human hair, but the suitcases and baskets and shoes provide a spiritual link with the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust.
I feel very responsible about these objects. It's a feeling closer to my sense of ethics and responsibility.
Art historian Eloise Bourgois from Bordeaux in France was drawn to Poland by her interest in the plight of displaced people.
We want to connect issues with the identity of the person, because that's the beautiful part of it. The ugly part of it is that we don't have the identities of the person.
But on very rare occasions, they do find a link. This shoe belonged to 6-year-old Amos Steinberg from Prague in the Czech Republic, who was murdered alongside his mother in 1944. His father Ludwig, who was deported to Auschwitz on an earlier transport, survived the war and became a school principal in Israel.
Mostly those shoes come from Hungary.
In just 8 weeks in 1944, some 425,000 Jews were deported to Auschwitz from Hungary. The gas chambers were so busy that these Hungarians were forced to wait their turn in the trees by crematorium 4.
Sometimes we can tell there is like the brand or the manufacturer written, and so we can tell, that comes from a region close to Budapest.
The conservators may not know the identities of the children whose shoes survived, but this is the man directly responsible for their deaths. Adolf Eichmann was one of the architects of Hitler's final solution and personally directed the deportation of Hungarian Jews before fleeing to Argentina after the war. Eichmann was abducted by Mossad and taken to Israel, where he went on trial in 1961.
In the spirit of the indictment, I am not guilty.
Eichmann was found guilty of crimes against the Jewish people and hanged. Rudolf Höss, the commandant of Auschwitz, on the right, also went to the gallows. But Josef Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, in the centre, fled to South America after the war and escaped justice. This chimney stack is all that remains of Mengele's clinic, where he conducted inhumane medical experiments, especially on twins. This wooden shack is evidence of the Nazis' determination to wipe out the Jewish people. Here, nurses used poison to murder children too young to wear shoes.
I'm sensitive by nature. Maybe you can hear from my voice. That means that distance is really the right way to go. But I think it doesn't remove my emotion.
The project is due to finish in April, but not before every shoe has been weighed and then photographed by coordinator Mirek Maciejewski.
You need to keep a certain separation while working with objects such as children's shoes. When you've got a shoe in your hand belonging to a child of 10 or 8 or younger, it's easy to let emotions get the better of you. But then, we can't work. We're here to conserve, to take care of these shoes, to preserve them for future generations.
Here are some more faces of Jewish children who lost their shoes and their lives in Auschwitz. They were murdered after participating in an opera in the Terezin concentration camp in what was Czechoslovakia. This is a Nazi propaganda film, shot after the Germans tricked the Red Cross into believing that Terezin was a spa town where Jewish prisoners were well treated.
Do you think it would be possible these days to be able to eradicate 6 million people in the way that the Jews were eradicated during the Second World War?
It's a very difficult question, honestly. I need to think a little.
With social media, with all the public pressure and everything?
Yeah, I think it would be very much possible to repeat the Holocaust, because I think propaganda is now more potent than it ever was. You mentioned social media as a factor of preventing propaganda, but I think the past 10 years, if they taught us anything, is that social media is also the perfect medium for propaganda.
As Nora says, appearances can be deceptive. This mural looks reassuring, but it's in a barrack that provided temporary shelter for so many children before they were gassed. It's preserved to remind the world of 2 words: never again. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Malcolm Brabant in Auschwitz-Birkenau.